All right, guys, we're back with the Mooncast
Part
for
two.
part two. Um, so, part one, just to recap, looks like we are leaning towards conspiracy on the um, moon landing.
Yeah.
So, we're going to start this one out with the hollow moon theory. There's some good points out there that say that it's hollow, and there's some good points out there and some scientific facts that show that it is not hollow. So one of the big ones that's out there where people they're taking what was said from the moon landing. They're saying that the Apollo missions reported that the moon rang like a bell for hours when it was struck by a lunar module, which suggests that it's hollow.
Yeah, they purposely crashed it into the moon. Yeah.
Yeah, and they say
And
it
then they
rang
put
like a bell
and they
for
put like
hours.
I think like a seismometer or something like that. And then yeah.
Yeah, so that definitely could mean that the moon is hollow. What they say on the other side is the ringing effect is due to the moon's dry, rigid crust and lack of water, which causes seismic waves to reverberate longer than at Earth.
Well, let me ask you this: in like your research, did you come across anything? And again, like this is limited research, and like we're probably a couple drinks deep now, but all to say that okay, like what if like the way that the internals of the moon are like it's kind of like honeycomb, like when you 3D print something, you're able to create cavities, kind of like a Swiss cheese of whatever it is that you're creating, even if it was like micro Swiss cheese elements to it, to where there's like, and this is technology that they're using in the new lunar lander, to where it's, we've tried to land on the moon. I think we spent something like $90 million ish to land a autonomous lander on the moon not too long ago, actually. And it actually tipped over because the center of gravity was way too high. So when we landed on the moon and it was using its autonomous systems to be able to kind of stabilize, it failed to recognize that there was a rock there, and it tipped over, and then it was done.
Did it echo?
That's a good question. I don't know, but all to say that the new version of this, and I can't remember the name of the company that is making this, but everything that is 3D printed, you can create or the means of being able to create hydraulics by kind of creating a honeycomb of a titanium structure to where it can actually resist some of the impact. Again, like I'm not a engineer or anything. I just know a lot of shit, and I also don't know a lot of shit. But all to say that if you look at the same premise of the moon, let's say that there is a honeycomb structure of the moon, or like I've also heard theories that the moon is actually a spaceship, and as it's drifting apart from the Earth, like, is it kind of evicting itself from us, to where it's, if you look at ancient scriptures and texts from, I don't remember what the exact name of the ancient civilization is, but there's like cave drawings, and the fact that the moon wasn't always there. It was placed there at some point in time in history. And I'm not going to say that I know exactly what it is, or like, who created the scriptures or whatever, but all to say that it wasn't there before. It is here today. Is it alien or is it not?
We're gonna get into that.
Okay.
Let's get through the hollow
Okay.
moon part of it, and then we'll get into some of the alien stuff going around it. We don't want to jump all over the place and confuse our listeners as well as ourselves.
Okay.
We're a few drinks in, so we definitely don't want to confuse ourselves.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so I mean, if it rings like a bell, it would suggest that it is hollow. But what if there's tunnels that are running underneath the moon,
Mm-hmm.
or there's a cave system that we don't know about, and that would suggest why you had that ringing?
Okay.
I don't know enough to go either way on that. But it also goes into, they did a test where they showed the density of the moon, where the density of the moon is significantly less than the Earth. Um, Probably about 40% difference. So a lot of theorists claim that's evidence that the moon is hollow. The opposite side, they say it's because of the composition. It's rich in lighter elements like oxygen and silicone compared to the Earth, and that causes the difference in density.
Hmm.
So, but if it is a less dense material, that could cause the ringing as well. So I could understand that aspect of it, but I don't understand if it's dry, rigid crust and it's dry. There's no water. How does that cause the seismic waves to ring like a bell?
Here's what bothers me about any kind of measurements or instrumentation to determine whether something is hollow or made of a particular material. How is it that we know that our Earth, okay, let's take a step back, like we're talking about Earth, has an iron core? Like, how do we know that there's iron that is essentially moving at a particular speed that is causing the gravitational field that we call gravity today, or electromagnetic current that essentially keeps everything in the place that it is today? Like, how do we know that if we have never actually drilled that deep to be able to derive a iron sample from the core of the Earth? Like, and you hear about it all the time. It's just all radio, like radio waves, essentially. And radio waves are everywhere, like in 5G signals, 4G signals, whatever it is, and stuff for deep space communication. Any kind of communication is all in radio waves. And it's kind of like the importance of electricity in everything is huge. Like, electricity is it's one of the building blocks of our solar system in some sort of way. Like, electricity is huge, or energy, or whatever. So when it comes to the moon, whenever we went and we crashed something against the moon and there was reverberation of the moon, how do we know what the moon is actually made up of if we're only able to collect samples from the surface?
Correct.
I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that.
I mean, there's no way to answer that until we actually drill into the moon as deep as we have drilled into the Earth.
But we haven't even drilled that deep into the Earth.
I mean, we've gone fairly deep into
Sure.
it. We haven't gotten to the core or close to the core, but we haven't gone into the moon a mile to see what it's made of. Yeah. We've gone on the surface, and that's where we found silicone and oxygen and some of the other minerals that we found in the moon rocks. There's a lot of little things with the moon that they talk about. There's gravitational anomalies on the moon. Does that affect how long we can be there and if we can drill into the moon? I mean, if we have unmanned crafts, would the gravitational anomalies that people talk about, would that make a difference? They're saying that there's mascons, which are mass concentrations in the gravitational field. That could imply that there's a lot of hidden voids or structures beneath the surface. Which, if there's structures beneath the surface, that takes us into, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Is it an alien base? What is beneath the surface that's hiding there? Maybe that's why we haven't been back to the moon. There's structures beneath. According to our scientists on Earth, they've claimed that the mascons are caused by dense materials below the surface, like lava flows or basalt deposits, not hollow spaces. But we haven't gone into the moon
Sure.
deep enough to know what lies beneath. So it's an educated guess by scientists as to what is a mile, 2 miles deep into the moon.
Here's what bothers me about that is, okay, so according to our research, the moon has a solid inner core, apparently, or whatever, which goes against what our theory is here. And that the radius of the moon's core is about 150 miles in. So, and there's reports that like the inner core of the moon is primarily composed of iron with a little bit of sulfur and nickel. Okay, how do we know that? You know, we have not dug 150 miles into the core of the moon. So some of the things that scientists use in order to develop opinions on what the magma or like the center of like the moon or even the earth is being able to use seismology to be able to determine what like the core principles of a particular celestial object may be. But like if you look at and okay, so outside of the moon, if you look at Venus or Jupiter or any kind of other celestial object or planet that's out there, how do we know the composition of each and every one of them if you can't actually get a seismology or seismic device on that particular celestial object to be able to measure what the core density of a particular, you know, celestial object is? Like that's what I don't understand is how can we definitively say there's iron in the center of the moon based off of just reverberations and be like, well, oh yeah, this is made of X, Y, and Z.
Let's get a little bit crazy and scientific at the same time. So
Okay.
if you were building the moon,
Okay.
like the Death Star,
Okay.
how big would you say, how thick would the outer shell be of your said Death Star?
Pretty thick.
How many meters would you say?
Meters, I would say at least 5 meters thick.
All right, let's say 5 meters. Let's say that's as thick as you want to go on it. I think you would actually have to go a lot thicker than that.
Okay.
Because to keep it from caving in with too much gravity or just to keep the structure together. So how far do you think...
But the Death Star had glass.
There was glass. It's clear it was sci-fi, but if you were building the moon, and I'm comparing it to the Death Star,
Okay.
let's say you just went 5 meters.
Okay.
I think you would have to go more. I think you'd have to be closer to 15 or 20 meters thick
Sure.
on the outer shell
Mm-hmm.
of the moon in order to keep it with the structure that it's at, to keep it intact.
Well, let me ask you a question though. If you look at any of the lunar module, or even the I forgot what it's called, but essentially like the deployment mechanism of being able to launch the lunar lander, I guess it's called the module or whatever. Like the thickness of that, I think it was like a matter of inches, maybe, or whatever, maybe a foot, if at max in terms of shielding.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's all you need to be able to protect against the density of space.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume.
But think about this: the upper crust of the Earth
Mm-hmm.
is like anywhere from like 18 to 40 miles thick.
Sure.
So the moon, let's say 20 meters, which is real fucking minimum.
Okay.
So when we've been to the moon, how deep do you think we have dug into the moon to take samples?
I mean, aside from surface level, like, I mean, with maybe like hand tools, less than 6 feet.
8 feet is the most we've dug into
Okay, that was
the moon's
close.
surface.
Okay, all right.
So if the moon's surface is 5 meters deep, we've only dug 2.4 meters into it. So if it was hollow, we would have never have gotten into past the outer thing. And if we, let's say we did 5.1, will we puncture the outer shell of the hollow moon? No. We haven't gone deep enough. So to your point, how do we know what the center is made of if we haven't gone more than 8 feet into the moon?
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know we only went, I thought we went at least a mile in. I've always thought we went like fairly deep.
Well, it's pretty
to dig in. 8 feet is nothing.
You need quite a bit of equipment in order for you to actually like bore a hole that deep.
Yeah.
You know, like even the hole that like the Russians, I think it was the Soviets at the time, like they there's a really popular, like, well, not popular, but well-known like hole that they dug that was like several miles deep, and yeah, it got so hot that they weren't able to actually dig any deeper. But I think that a lot of the theory behind what the Earth's core is made of is based off of the research that we've done on volcanoes and whatever, you know, seismology is able to tell us in terms of reverberations and how that the frequencies of reverberations can mean towards the frequency of what iron gives out and stuff. So like if we were to send a radio wave into the crust of the Earth, like the return of the radio wave would equate to what iron would be.
Exactly.
Yeah. I guess that's what it would be.
Have we done that on the moon?
I mean, okay, so, I mean, realistically speaking, you would have to do it within a day.
Mm-hmm. But sound waves don't travel in space.
Did the astronauts actually sleep on the moon?
I don't know. That's a whole other question.
I think they only spent like a couple of hours on the moon, if that.
Yeah.
You know, because you had the module, the lunar module, that was essentially just it was rotating around the moon, and you had to time it right to be able to send the module, the lunar lander, to be able to detach from the legs, to be able to dock with the module itself.
Yeah, it's all timing, getting onto and getting off the moon.
Right.
So, with the hollow moon, the last thing I'm going to say is there's a lot of myths and legends throughout history. One in particular, the Zulu. They have a lot of legends suggesting that the moon was placed in the sky or that it was artificial. They have that in a lot of their writings. So that could lead us into a whole nother thing with that it was aliens who placed the moon there. But a lot of people feel, myths and legends from ancient tribes and cultures, they're all symbolic or allegorical. They're not really scientific evidence. And it doesn't provide like concrete support of anything. And I get that. So for me, is the moon hollow? I don't know. It's inconclusive. There hasn't been enough research done on the moon. We've been there. Maybe. Possibly. Maybe. We've taken very few samples. We've dug 8 feet into the moon when it could be 16 feet deep to get through. If we go bare minimum 5 meters, we've only been 2.4, 2.6 into it.
Yeah.
So we haven't dug deep enough to see if we penetrate an outer hull or something.
Yeah.
But the Zulus and some of your other ancient cultures suggest that it was placed there. Why would it have been placed there? Did the aliens place it there as a moon base?
Yeah.
To watch us? Their creation?
Maybe.
There's some theories where the aliens helped progress humans on this planet for a lot of various reasons. So wouldn't they have to be here to watch us? Wouldn't they have to be close? Moon's right there. You oversee the Earth 24 hours a day as the Earth turns and Moon moves. Everything happens with the orbit. So with the alien base theory, there's a few things out there. um, that they talk about. There's a lot of lunar anomalies, such as there's structures and shapes in a lot of NASA photographs that are interpreted as artificial constructs and alien installations.
Interesting.
There's reports of bright lights and strange activity on the moon's surface, known as transient lunar phenomena. And they're cited as evidence of alien presence on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we have a lot of people who claim to see aliens flying around. Why would they not, if they're on the moon, if that's a base, if they're coming from there, if that's one of the aliens that are visiting us, why would they not come from the moon?
Interesting. You know, what if a lot of what we know of Mars, for instance, I actually personally believe that Mars is a place that contains some history with like aliens, and I feel like there was an ancient civilization that lived on Mars and then it made its way over here in some sort of way. What if you think about the word Martians, and why would we call Martians Martians when, like, a lot of the research that we did in the past, we didn't have a goal, I guess, at the beginning to be able to inhabit Mars in the way that, like, Elon Musk is wanting to inhabit Mars. And then what if, like, the moon itself was a derivative of the Martian atmosphere that then made it over to planet Earth? But I think that the Earth is actually a lot bigger than Mars. But all to say that I think that the object that we call the moon might actually have been placed there at some point in time in the past, and then it's there for the purpose of it being a monitoring station. And the reason why we've spent so much time, avoiding the moon is because we have kind of an agreement with extraterrestrials that don't allow us to return back to the moon because there is something that we aren't supposed to see. I mean, that's an option there too. And a lot of the canvassing that we're doing today is all monitored by these extraterrestrials that say, hey, listen, like, you can't show this to the public. You can show this, but you can't show that. You got to be able to, I actually think that there is a mix of extraterrestrials in our government, or, like the folks that we talk to in terms of like consultants in what we do in the future are all governed by individuals that are both of Earth origin and not. It's a mix.
Yeah, it's possible. But where the moon is placed, it's a good landing spot between us and Mars.
Sure.
What if it's a fueling station?
Well, that's what we're trying to do.
What if you're coming from Mars, you land on the moon to monitor us, you fuel up, then you come here.
Yeah.
And vice versa. You take off from here, you refuel at the moon, and you head back. We may not have what they need here to refuel. So they have to refuel at the moon. Maybe nuclear technology is how they...
Well, let's pull on that, right? So when it comes to rocket fuel as the propellant, so as the solid rocket boosters that take you from the Earth to the moon or anywhere else, there is, like, on the moon itself, there are the ability to derive specific material to be able to create these propellants. So being able to essentially take the hydrogen from the moon, because there is I believe that NASA has discovered, and other space agencies have discovered, that there is hydrogen on the moon, and be able to essentially extract the particles between, to essentially create rocket fuel, and be able to create that or make the moon a launching point to other places throughout the solar system. and stuff. So all to say that I think that theory is pretty plausible, to where you're able to essentially take that the composition of the moon and create a base for launching to other places around the solar system.
But that's also assuming that alien technology would require rocket fuel.
Okay.
Because based upon what we've seen and what's been described of alien spacecraft, they don't move like our ships. They don't just move forward or up and forward. They move left, right, up, down. They move in all these different directions, which would imply that they somehow change the gravity around them.
Okay.
So,
but
what do they refuel with?
But wouldn't the gravity around the moon be different if that were the
Absolutely.
case? Yeah.
But that's where they could have a reactor that, based upon what the gravity is on the moon versus Mars versus Earth, it adapts and allows them to move left, right, up, down, however they need to, no matter where they are.
Makes sense.
But what powers that? I don't know if it would be as rudimentary as rocket fuel, where that we're using that to go directly into space. We don't, when we're launching into space with rocket fuel, we're not able to shift and go north, south, east, west. We have one direction till we get to space. And then we use propulsion to guide us through space. We're not really stopping on a dime and making a left in space. So I don't think rocket fuel would be how they would fuel. What do they fuel with, though? Yeah. But we don't know what's at the center of the moon that they're using to power.
Yeah.
What if there's a station inside the moon?
And then there's the argument of renewable resources. Like, is it whatever we're using to propel ourselves, or even like aliens are using to propel themselves? Like, is it a renewable resource, like nuclear power and stuff, and what's in a nuclear reactor? Like, these are all renewable. Like, yeah, they're very dangerous in terms of the composition of whatever is being used as a means for propulsion. But if you're able to contain it, because like, I mean, like in Rogan podcasts and stuff like that. I mean, there's folks that have been on the show, and they've actually been exposed to Area 51 and some of the crashed UFOs that are out there, and some of the technology that was derived from it was actually basically like orbs that contained the means for bending what we call gravity. But what is gravity? Like, there's an explanation, or a feasible explanation of what gravity is, but there's missing pieces to it. Where Albert Einstein specifically stated that there is missing pieces that we don't know in terms of the theory of relativity and other things that are out there. Like, we're missing something, and it has to do with the moon.
And the aliens have it, where they know how to adjust to it, and maybe they are powered by some type of nuclear reactor that they've been able to contain where it's safe for them. And that's why they're constantly here near our power plants, near our nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
And watching us, seeing how we're doing it. Have we come up with a way that's better? Do we have a cleaner way? Or do they need the nuclear power from us? Hence why we detonated the nuclear bomb under the water.
Maybe.
Many years ago.
Yeah.
Right after we first saw aliens.
Yeah.
Like within a year or two. So maybe we had to recharge one of their spacecraft. But that's another discussion for another day. But with the moon being a base for them, what if it's nuclear powered in the center and it was placed there so the Martians could come here, and that's just where they refuel to head back? Or what if they're not from Mars? What if they're from further out? Jupiter, Saturn.
I mean, there's
another galaxy. They need a place to recharge before they launch back into their orbit.
Well, if you think about the Soviets, and I'll leave it at this because we're almost at 30 minutes, is they were so infatuated with Venus or Venetians,
Yeah.
and being able to land there's multiple missions to Venus, even though it was 100%, almost like a 90% fail rate, to be able to land on Venus and be able to effectively be able to communicate the data from Venus and stuff. Like there's interesting stuff about the atmosphere. There was there's the temperature of the environment and everything. There's a lot that went into it, and they discovered some. They actually were able to actually derive some very interesting images from the Venetian surface. But why were they so infatuated with Venus? It's almost very similar to like the moon, in the sense that we're infatuated with the moon, but we're very careful with what we do with the moon. But why? Where the moon is a lot more accessible, why skip the moon and then go to Mars? Like, why not study everything that we want to know about the moon, because it's just the closest celestial object?
Were we told no?
Were we told?
Were we told you can't come back here? Because there are interviews with Buzz Aldrin where he said he saw some unexplained things that happened.
Yeah.
They've shot them down, saying that what he saw, like, were detached rocket panels, reflections, debris, things like that. Saying it was a miscommunication.
Sure.
That's how our government always wants to tell you you're wrong. It was a miscommunication between a couple people.
Sure.
So Buzz Aldrin had stated that he saw some things, and we shot those down. We're like, nope, it's space debris. It was your rocket booster that you saw going through space. Maybe something happened there. Maybe that was Buzz Aldrin trying to tell us, hey, there was something there, and we were able to take our photo, and they said, get the hell off our planet. And if it's an alien base or an alien refueling station, we're not allowed back, because we are not using nuclear technology to travel to the other side of the universe yet.
That's a very good point. And with that, we'll end episode 2 here, or part 2 here, and then we'll carry on after this. Stay tuned.